Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today's topic, I wanted to just react to a video that was sent my way a few days ago. One of my contacts who's in Brazil. And it just speaks to it's a topic that I cover from time to time, and a lot of times it's coming from my own perspective. I often highlight the perspective of Brazilians themselves to see what they have to say about certain topics, whether they agree with something that I said, or it sheds more light on one of my opinions, or it goes against what I was saying. But another source of perspectives on Brazil are other people who are not Brazilians, but who are living in Brazil, who have been to Brazil. And, I have quite a few people that I've known over the years. I've known people from Britain. I've known people from obviously the United States. I've known people from France, Australia, Germany. I've known a lot of people who have lived in Brazil. Okay. In that 9-year period that I lived in Brazil, I knew there were African Americans all over the country. I knew African Americans in Bahia, Rio, Sao Paulo. I knew a few that were living in Rio Grande do Sul in the south of the country. One of my contacts didn't per se lived in Ceará, another northeastern state, but they spent a lot of time there. Some of my contacts had spent time in Pernambuco, another northeastern state. I had been around. I've only known 5 Brazilian states myself, but between my experiences and that of others, I think we get a pretty clear picture of what it is to live in Brazil. That's a whole nother topic, actually, because a lot of people will contact me just to know, well, how did you just like living in Brazil overall? I have to talk about that one day. Generally it was a pleasant experience, but there were things that I definitely didn't like about living there. There were things that I liked more about living in Brazil than I did in the US. It just depends on which of these subjects, the things that you need to live on a day-to-day basis, which are most important to you and which are not. That's going to determine how you can adapt to another country. So anyway, I'm talking about this video that I came across a few days ago, and I'm calling it "American Citizen Discovers That Brazil is the Most Segregated Country in the Americas." Now, I know this guy is basing this based on his own experience. It's another topic to go, and this is like anecdotal evidence, but it's another thing to go and to actually do the research and line up the countries one by one from top to bottom to see which countries are more segregated in terms of race. We can always make the class divide, but most Latin American countries have a Black population, whether it's small or it's larger. People of African ancestry who were enslaved throughout the Americas, you find them all over the place. So, if you're an American, I know a lot of us learn about just Black history in the United States, but Black history, we have to stress this again and again. It's not just the United States. It's not just the Americas. African people, African descendant people have a long history of just importance in world history. It's just that our history has been excluded and erased from the textbooks. So then this adds to the racist tendencies that a lot of non-Black people have, because they seem to think that Africans haven't contributed anything to the world when it's the exact opposite, actually. That's a whole nother topic. I'm not going to get into that right now. Right now, I want to react to what this video said, what this guy was saying in his video, just on his experiences in Brazil. So I guess he's an American citizen. I don't know exactly what his background is, but this is a video. I won't have to overdub this because he is speaking in English, but just check out what he has to say. Then I'm going to come back and just like react to it.
I love living in Brazil. I have here in açaí. They call this the mega bombo. I got it with whey protein. It's açaí, ginger. You got some other stuff in there and whey protein. So good. Now, I love Brazil, but this is a country of extremes. I mean, like, really extreme. People think that the United States is very segregated and racist, but I mean, clearly they've never been to Brazil. I've been living in this neighborhood, cumulatively, probably 3 months. I have never had a Black neighbor in any of the buildings I've lived in anywhere in Brazil. Brazil offers the fewest opportunities to the poor people of any country I've ever been to. I mean, at least in Colombia and in the United States especially, you will see black people in nice neighborhoods that live in the neighborhoods, not just the servants. But here, it's still like as if it's like it's like Jim Crow here. You know, it's pretty bad. And like with other countries, no, obrigado. And
Okay, so you hear what the guy had to say there. He threw out a lot of everything that he said. There was stuff that I could comment on. First thing, has nothing to do with this topic, but acai is something that I really love. If you ever gone to Brazil or if you plan on going to Brazil, you definitely have to try, the fruit that's called acai. Acai berry. Generally, I like to mix it, with a milk base. You add just maybe a little bit of sweetener syrup to it. It just the juices of Brazil is something that I always love adapting to the different type of food that people eat there. That's a whole nother topic again. But I want to stay on focus as to what this guy was just talking about. Listen to what he said. Apparently, he's well traveled. He's lived or spent extensive time in other countries around the Americas. And he said that, he just where he lives in Brazil, or I don't know how many states he's lived in Brazil, but he says he generally doesn't find black people in the nice neighborhoods that he lives in. And this is something that I can speak to because I've seen this all the time. He said, living in the neighborhoods that he lives in Brazil, it reminds him of like what we've read about Jim Crow America. It's the least opportunity for black Brazilians to move up. And he's speaking on all of the countries. He says Brazil is the most segregated country of the Americas. So this is something that I like to often talk about because if you will listen to what Brazilians say about this question, it's the United States is the most racist country. And I've said this over and over again. To me, it's not a question of which country is the most racist. Which country, and if we're speaking of all the countries in the Americas or just the relationship or the comparison between Brazil and the United States, which of those countries is more sophisticated and more successful in making sure black people stay on the bottom of society? And when I make that question, there's just no question about it. It's Brazil, hands down. There's material that I've reviewed and read over the years that just says Brazilian society can't adapt to having black people in middle class environments the way that you see them in the United States. Now, in the United States, a lot of black Americans, we're looking like we still don't have our piece of the pie. We're still being held back. The United States still owes us trillions of dollars for all of the contributions we've made to American society. There's a call for reparations, as there is in Brazil. So this is the point that I'm trying to make. If you've lived in the United States, you lived in Brazil, there are areas in the United States you can go and you can just see black wealth. You'll see black people who have a much higher standard of living. You can't find an area like that in Brazil. And this for several reasons. I mean, when slavery ended in Brazil in 1888, again, Brazil was the last country to end slavery in the Americas. It's like black people were left on their own accord, okay, y'all free, get out and, get it done, they got no help from the government. We know this story as well. They brought in 4 to 5 million European immigrants to replace the enslaved black labor they were enslaved for 350 years or so. So black Brazilians were left to their own accord. Then you have the idea of whitening. Black and brown people have been taught for decades that you should want to whiten your offspring. So when black people do happen to ascend socially, they're going to be in an area where all of their neighbors are white. So they're going to send their kids to majority white schools. And then they're going to end up, their partner, they're going to choose from around of the people who are around them. And generally there's going to be a white man or white women who they're going to mate with. And so then the whitening process goes on because every black person who gets something marries white. And within 2 to 3 generations, the money or the success that person has automatically goes back to the white community. All right. So I'll say Brazil is far more successful in keeping black people on the bottom of the totem pole in the country. I mean, how much evidence do we really need? For those of you who have been to Brazil, you've experienced Brazil, you've been there for an extended period of time, I want to hear what you have to say. I already know it's true because my experience in Brazil is about 24, almost 25 years now. I lived there for 9 years. I visited back and forth for several years and I've seen it. It just doesn't fail. You go to poor areas, you're going to see mostly non-white people, even though there are white people poor as well there. But when you go to solidly middle class or upper middle class neighborhoods, the only black people you're going to see in those neighborhoods, no matter what city you're in, is going to be white people. The only black people you're going to see are the people who work in those apartments or the homes of elite white families. I mean, if people think I'm exaggerating, I would love to hear from other people who have lived in Brazil, because this is something that I saw all the time that I lived there. Um, so it's always a thing of Brazil never had legal segregation, but I always say it is de facto segregation. It just shows that you don't need laws to keep black people frozen out of certain areas of society. It's a de facto segregation. You didn't need any laws, but the way that it was brilliant, the way they froze black people out of society. That's the way that they did it. The United States is similar in the way that you didn't have legalized segregation in the North, but the segregation still happened. You don't need laws to segregate groups. I mean, it should be pretty clear for anybody who's lived in, you go to places like New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, you go back to the history of those cities in the United States in 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you're going to see the same thing. Okay. There were no laws there, but somehow you go to these cities and you're going to know when you're in a black neighborhood or a black side of town. My own experiences. So let me explain something. My first experiences in Brazil were in Bahia, various cities over Bahia. I can speak on Salvador Bahia, where even though it's considered a majority black city, the capital of Bahia, when you go to those elite neighborhoods, you're going to see mostly white people, or what we'll call Brazilian white. Those people who they're white in Brazil, but they may not be white in the United States, for example. I saw this in Salvador. When I lived in Sao Paulo, and when I taught English for several years in Sao Paulo, and one of the schools that I worked for, matter of fact, two of them, the new way of teaching English for schools was that kids weren't coming to English school, even though I taught at some of those schools as well. They would assign teachers and send the teachers out to whatever neighborhood they were going to teach in. And so working in Sao Paulo, it took me to areas of Sao Paulo that I had never seen before. Visiting some of the kids and teenagers of some of these elite families, wow, I could really understand how Sao Paulo is the economic engine of Brazil, because these were well-to-do families. If I did see black people, they were either the maids, the cooks. I didn't see black people in these neighborhoods. I just did not see them. And I was all over Sao Paulo. I'm going to go through a list of some of the top neighborhoods in Sao Paulo and also Salvador. And I can just show you, the higher you go up in the economic status in Brazil, they call it class A, B, C, D, and E. The upper classes of class B and the upper classes of class A, the A and B are considered the most wealthy classes in the country. The higher you go, the fewer black people you're going to see. And I experienced that. The only black students that I ever taught were in a school that were in the periphery of Sao Paulo. It was a half an hour drive from where I lived, and it was in a poor neighborhood. So I saw black and brown students there as well as white students. But when you go into those upper crust neighborhoods, I didn't see any black people. It's not just me. If you go to the blog, blackbraziltoday.com, and punch in segregation, you'll see some of the stories that I was telling about that. One of them was from an African-American woman that I met when I was in Sao Paulo. She talked about living in Pinheiros. Pinheiros is one of those upper crust neighborhoods in Sao Paulo. She was like, she didn't see any black people there, at least living there. Another one of my contacts he's into the, we'll say finances. And he talked about living in Moema. Shout out to Mr. Moss, lived in Moema. And he talked about how people would look at him strange whenever he was in that apartment building. Like, what are you doing here? It's unexpected. You don't expect to see black people in certain regions of Sao Paulo or any other city throughout Brazil if it's, let's say, a upper crust neighborhood. Brazil's way of segregating the black population is not just, speaking of residential segregation. A lack of laws made it that Brazil did its segregation of the black population in other ways. When you do the research on Carnival, you found that black Brazilians were excluded in certain cities from participating in Carnival. The Afro Block, or they call it the Afro Block or Bloco Afro in Salvador, known as Ilha. They started off as they're all black uh, when I say Bloco Afro, it's one of those type of carnival groups that parades through the city. These are called Blocos. They came up with the idea since black people were not allowed to participate in carnival in one of the blackest cities in the country, so they formed their own Afro block, Ile, and they became one of the biggest groups in the city. Can you imagine a majority non-white city and black people were secluded from carnival to the point that they had to organize their own groups? The malls, when you go to Brazil and you go to shopping malls, you'll find malls that are for more the common people, what they call shoppings populares, like the popular mall just for everyday people. Then you'll have those elite malls that you go to. I remember going to a couple of those malls in Sao Paulo, and I was like, because I've seen this in Detroit as well, in suburban Detroit, there are malls just for everyday people, and then you got malls that are for the wealthy. And I would see that. It's like, this is amazing. And you go into those elite malls, you're not going to find many black people. Maybe they'll be working there. That'll be about it. You have elite clubs in Brazil, sports clubs. You know, Brazil doesn't have a history of having athletic programs for basketball, football, where athletes will train during their college education years. Brazil has sports clubs. And to get into those sports clubs, people have to come from a wealthy family. You're not going to be able to afford to train at these elite sports centers. There was a story about this gymnast, and I thought about that guy because the Olympics in Paris just ended. I think his name was Angelo Assunção. And he was an up and coming gymnast, this black kid. And he was winning all of these medals and these world championships. But he was the victim of some racist comments from his white or almost white teammates some years ago. When he spoke out against the racism that he was experiencing, he lost his scholarship to practice, to train in gymnastics at this elite club. I wonder today, I've talked about his name. I've talked about Angelo Assunção in other audios. I just wonder where that kid is today because the Olympics just passed. He would have been another big hopeful for Brazil's men's gymnastics team. But because of his position of speaking out on racism, he lost his scholarship. And the black population in general is not going to be able to afford to go to those type of elite sports schools, without some financial support. So between carnival, malls, elite clubs, neighborhoods, everywhere you go, Brazil has found a way to keep its black population in its place, quote unquote, in its place. How did they do that? That's what's fascinating about it. They didn't do it the same way as the United States and South Africa, but anybody who goes to Brazil, they will see a clear segregation. That is, if you're a person who doesn't pay attention to race or these types of things, you could be in a neighborhood and it doesn't really strike you because you're not looking for it. But for anybody else who has gone there and you're accustomed to seeing black people in certain areas, good luck in Brazil. That has changed a little bit in the last decade, with more black people getting education in Brazil through affirmative action policies, but it's a very slow process. So wanted to talk a little bit more about this. All of the stats are there, segregation in education. Blacks make up less than 10% of students in the top 20 private schools in Brazil. What else can be said? What the racial map of Brazil reveals about segregation. This African-American woman, this is one of the women that I met while I was living in Sao Paulo. She shared her experience living in an upper crust neighborhood in Sao Paulo. I believe it was Pinheiros that she lived. Definitely check out that article. Racial democracy or informal apartheid, South Africa and Brazil. Two historical, cultural contexts, different times, the same segregation. So who says you need legal segregation to oppress a certain group without laws? Brazilian style segregation strikes again. Military police in Rio stops a bus, rounds up a group of black teenagers headed for the Copacabana beach. Beaches in Brazil, particularly in Rio, are some of the biggest examples of segregation that you're going to see in the country. It's like people don't want to see. Of course, there's been some petty crime that has gone on there. So in general, it's like, wow, if I go to the beach in Copacabana, Ipanema, they're going to be looking at me like, well, what are you doing here? That guy's here to cause trouble. There was a story I did some years ago. I don't know which beach it was. It might have been Ipanema, but these two black guys were walking around on a beach. And all of a sudden, word got around the beach, like, these two guys look like they're here for some trouble. There was a video some years ago about these like confrontations that was going on the beach in Rio. Like they don't want to see brown, black skinned people on the beach. Okay. Segregation on the beach. These 4 cases show how there's nothing subtle about Brazilian acts of racism. In every one of these cases, it's a situation of what are these black people doing here? So Brazil achieved the same thing without having to use legal mechanisms to keep people segregated. You know, when you go into a certain neighborhood, matter of fact, one of the articles that I reviewed some years ago, it was a journalist, and he lived in Niterói, which is across the bridge from Rio, the city of Rio, in the state of Rio de Janeiro. And he talked about being in certain neighborhoods, and he had to watch his back because eyebrows are raised, people start crossing the street in his presence. Police will arrest black people walking around in certain neighborhoods just based on the voice of something that somebody said. There was a black guy walking around here. I don't feel comfortable. Okay. Spaces of freedom and autonomy, how black social clubs provided financial support and leisure activities for blacks in post-abolition Brazil. Social clubs, going back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, did not allow black Brazilians into these clubs, so they had to form their own. Again, you don't need laws to segregate people. Carnival, particularly in Bahia, with no sponsorship, Bahia's black artists will do no live Carnival shows. Top white artists attain various sponsors and will perform. Segregation in Carnival, particularly in Bahia, where black people, the black artists, don't get the same sponsorships as the white artists. They're not allowed to have the more popular routes where these Carnival progressions would go. They get the less TV time, and they get let's say they get the hours of TV that's not on prime time. So these are all ways that Brazil manages to keep black people in this place without laws. Porto Alegre and Minneapolis, besides the brutal murders of black men, we know about George Floyd in Minnesota, and then there was João Alberto Ferreira, I think his name was, brutal murder, I think in 2020. The cities also have high racial inequality indexes in common. So if you go to the site, you'll see just some of these articles that I use to back up what I'm talking about. This article from let me see, Info Money magazine. These are the 15 richest neighborhoods in Sao Paulo. And so if you visit some of these neighborhoods were areas where I would go to teach English to these kids in these upper crust apartments and some houses. Jardim Europa, Vila Nova Conceição, Vila Olímpia, Itaim Bibi, Jardim America, Brooklyn, Jardim Paulistano, Moema, Pássaros, Pinheiros, Vila Madalena. These are some of the neighborhoods that I visited. These are some of the neighborhoods that I taught English in, so I can verify that this is definitely what I saw. I never had a black student in any of these neighborhoods. Then you have the richest neighborhoods of Salvador Bahia. And again, Salvador Bahia is considered the center of black culture in all of Brazil. It is the city that's considered to have the darkest skinned people. It's supposed to be 80% black and brown, whereas it's about 19 or 20% of what we'll call white. And if you go down and look, you'll see like Baja. I never saw any black people in Baja. I'm not saying there aren't any, but I'm just saying, I knew a few people that lived in Baja. These were, white people. I didn't see any black people in any of these neighborhoods. Let me see, what else do we have here? Ongina, Caminho das Árvores. If you go to these neighborhoods, just, keep an eye out. Count how many black people you see, and of the black people that you see, how many of them are working in the homes of their white bosses. Okay. Let's see here. Race and poverty in Latin America, addressing the development of needs of African descendants. So this is throughout the Americas. This is not just a Brazil thing. But this is what the site says. In the country with the largest African descendant population in the hemisphere, Brazil, we know that if the white and black populations were classified separately, the Human Development Index of a hypothetical Afro-Brazilian nation would rank 101, while an all-white nation would rank 46. The official HDI ranking of Brazil is 69, which is roughly the average of the two racially divided Brazil countries. The exclusion of Afro-Brazilians harms development prospects for the nation as a whole, right? An Inter-American Development Report recently calculated that Brazil and other Latin American countries' economies could expand by over 1/3 if people of color were fully included in the workforce of the nations. Okay. Excellent article here. It goes into looking into countries like Colombia, Costa Rica, Belize, Bolivia. All of these countries have black populations. This just goes back to what the guy said in the video. He's lived in various countries, and he finds that Brazil is probably the most segregated in the Americas. I want to find more data to be able to verify what he said, but that's intriguing. It definitely lines up with my own experience. This is just an article from the so-called Jolezinos that was going on back in 2014. Large populations of black and brown kids would go to these elite malls. They weren't going to the popular malls like where they're supposed to be, but they would go to these elite malls. Security would follow them around, harass them, kick them out of the mall. And let's see this. The guy who was quoted in this article says he saw similarities with 50s and 60s sit-ins in the United States. So these young black and brown people would go into these elite malls just to be harassed by the police. Like, what are you guys doing here? You don't look like you belong here. You're here to cause trouble. So this is something that we saw, like, it's hard to believe these Jolezinos was going down 10 years ago. Another way that Brazil segregates its black population without having to create any laws to do so. So anyway, I'm curious. I'm sure a lot of you are commenting on the YouTube channel. Definitely go check out some of these articles on blackbraziltoday.com. There's almost 4,000 articles there. Listen to what this guy says. I want to know what your experience is if you lived in Brazil, any part of Brazil. Is this guy just overflating things? Is he exaggerating, or was this your experience? I know this was my experience. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment in the comment section. Like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on the notification bell so that you know when I put up another video. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post.